Folks, it's 11 o'clock on Monday, October 3rd. So we're scheduled a press conference at this time. We're starting right on time, so we're pretty proud of that. My name is Ray Lutz with Citizens Oversight, and we've got all the volunteers behind us who've been instrumental in watching the registrar of voters here in San Diego County and figuring out what they're doing wrong, cutting corners, and running an audit that is not a clean audit. It basically turns out to be a sham. So they're running an audit that will allow people to rig the election. We filed a lawsuit early in June, right after the election, and that's when we first discovered that they were omitting about 37% of the ballots from the audit process. That means that any hacker can go in and modify those 37% of the ballots and fix the election without anyone knowing. The reason we have these audits in place, a law that we cherish, is to stop rigging and hackers and so forth from doing anything like that. When we noticed that this is what they were doing, and by the way, I've been trying to understand their process since 2008 through a rigorous investigation, trying to understand exactly how this registrar of voters runs their audit, and it was a very difficult process. And finally, I discovered that I needed a file, a special file, to be able to compare with what they're doing. And we got to get that at the right time, and that's called the snapshot file. So for the last few years, I've been asking for that file so that we could compare the results of their audit, which is only a portion of the votes. So you can't compare the audit with all of the votes. It's not going to compare. And they've been leaving out so many. We said, well, we need at least that file of what you're doing on the partial audit so that we can compare it. And they were forthcoming, and they've given us that file. Only this year did we realize that they're actually not ever completing the audit. We thought they were going and completing the rest of the audit all these years. And this year it became very clear that they were only doing this about 63% of the votes and leaving out the 37%. And that's when we said, please include all of the votes in the audit in the realm of what they choose from. And Michael Vu said, no, I wouldn't do that. So they proceeded, surprisingly, midstream, changed how they were running the audit. They went from a batch mode process where they would first do the precincts, which is when you go to the precinct near your house, a physical precinct, and vote. All those were audited correctly and included. The early vote by mail ballots and the later vote by mail ballots and the provisionals, they were planning to handle these through a process of batches instead of a precinct by precinct basis. That's how they chose. And the original meeting, they chose batches. Mid-month, they decided to switch gears, losing a whole bunch of work that they put into counting the batches and restarting it in precincts. Bad news is they have to go into those batches and pull out individual ballots and search for all of the ballots that correspond to a precinct before they do the counting. Well, guess what? That can add all kinds of possible rigging. The guy inside can make sure he picks the right ballots that will add up to the right thing. Turns out they don't even add up correctly, as we discovered that the count of ballots is off, and it's something that we're going to confront them with. So, lawsuit filed about June 14th or so, maybe it was the 12th. Right after we discovered this, filed the lawsuit, and now another couple of months has gone by, a hearing. We couldn't stop them from certifying the first election. We said, stop them from certifying. They're not doing it according to the law, but the judge couldn't get it done in time. Then the election was certified. They had the conventions, Hillary Clinton and so forth as when, so is Trump. And so then he says it's moot. We can't stop anything, so that part of your lawsuit is out. Tomorrow, we're going for the trial in Superior Court of San Diego. Michael Vu will be on the stand. The Chief Administrative Officer of San Diego County, Helen Robbins Meyer, will be on the stand. their other workers within the registrar of voters will be on the stand testifying with their hand up under oath, talking about what they did in this election. Now, we already know that they're violating the law. They claim, however, it's okay to leave out 37% of the ballots from the audit. And the rationale that they mostly give is other counties are doing it too. Other counties are also violating the law. A while back, the Secretary of State, he came out and said, well, look, we think they don't really need to follow this law. And basically, this was a cover letter. It's okay to continue, not including all of the ballots because we don't really think that you need to. Well, it comes down to this law. Does the law mean what it apparently says, or does it mean something else? Because the law says that you need to include all of the ballots in the tally, in the manual tally. And instead they're leaving out 37% of the ballots from the tally, and they then have to explain it. Well, the late vote-by-mail ballots that they're leaving out of this manual tally, there's no explanation except other counties are also leaving out lots of ballots from the manual tally. There's no way that they can say the law doesn't say that because it's very, very clear. Now, the provisional ballots, which is about 10% of the vote in this last election, they're also leaving out of the manual tally. And they say they don't need to put that in because the law originally said and provisionals, and they took that out, and so that means you don't have to put them in. Well, in order to figure this out, and in the trial, I'm going to give you a little bit of what we're going to be arguing in the trial based on the legislative intent. So you can go to the Secretary of State of California and ask them to give you the legislative history of any bill. And they will give you hundreds of pages, and that's what we got for the legislative history of this bill. So we went in and actually pulled out what was important in this and figured out what happened. Turns out in 2006 they had another bill that was on the table called AB 707. This was to allow any county in the state to conduct a by mail only election. Mail only election, although it's M-A-I-L, not M-A-L-E. They actually had to clear that up because people were saying mail only? No, we want females too. Now it means that you're sending it only by mail with no precincts, or basically there'll be a few precincts but not all over the place. This bill was not successful. However, in the body of this bill, they had a recognition that a lot of these counties were not conducting a sufficient manual tally, because guess what? If you were leaving the mail ballots out, then if you were doing all mail ballots, all mail elections, you wouldn't do any manual tallying at all. It says here, the votes on absentee ballots, and by the way, that's the nomenclature they used before. Now they're calling them vote by mail, because you don't have to be absentee. You can be a permanent vote by mail voter. The votes on absentee ballots are no less valid or important than the votes cast at the polling place. And the potential for a vote to be inaccurately tabulated on an absentee ballot is just as likely as a vote cast in a traditional polling booth. Therefore, it makes no sense to exclude absentee ballots, provisional ballots, and ballots cast at satellite locations from the 1% manual tally. By excluding them from the manual tally, there is no way to verify that the votes cast on them are being recorded accurately. Moreover, if in the event that counties are authorized to conduct an all-mail election, this provision would ensure that the manual tally is still conducted. So they had to make a change. Remember, most of these counties at this point were not including any of the vote by mail ballots in their manual tally at all. So this is how it came up. This was unsuccessful. So at that time, the legislature says, well, we got to do something about this. And so the Secretary of State then came out with, and this is dated around actually it's not dated, but it came out around February of 2006. in this letter from the Secretary of State, Bruce McPherson at the time, he said this proposal requires a county election official to include all ballots cast in a precinct in the 1% manual tally, that a county will need to include any ballots cast at the polls via absentee ballot, provisional votes, and any ballots cast on direct recording electronic devices. Secretary of State saying they wanted it. This is how it started. So then they sponsored the bill. And in their bill they say, the manual tally shall include all ballots cast by voters in each of the precincts selected, including absentee, provisional, and special absentee ballots. Again, saying that vote by mail and provisionals will be included, obviously. So then this goes on, and we have a couple of bills that were sponsored. One in the Assembly called 2769 by Benoit. You'd think it would be pronounced Benoit, but that's not how he pronounces it. Benoit. And it had originally provisionals and absentee ballots. Then we have the one by Deborah Bowen, who later became the Secretary of State, but this time she was a senator from Redondo Beach area. And then they started this SB 1235, Senate Bill 1235, and this was basically the one that was the main bill that was carried forward. And in this bill, they included almost exactly that language that I read from the original, the 707 that didn't make it. Exactly that same language was moved over into this bill. And the other things in this bill was to allow randomization, better random selection. Because at that time, the registrar of voters were selecting which precincts they would manually tally. It wasn't random, it wasn't a surprise, nothing. They would just pick the ones that a complete sham, ridiculous. Now, Senator Bowen, this is a letter from the California Association of Clerks and Elections Officials, dated June 13, 2006. This is the letter that the county says proves that the election officials wanted them to leave out provisionals. Unfortunately, in this letter, it says the CACEO, or CACEO, supports the concept of your bill to include the absentee and provisional ballots in the 1% manual count. They support it. Never did they have an explicit request to leave out the provisional ballots. Never happened. What they said was, however, it needs to be amended to provide that the Secretary of State amend the voting system use procedures. Then they go on to address the inclusion of absentee ballots and provisional ballots, blah, blah, blah. But they never tell you how they wanted the Secretary of State to amend the procedures. Amending the procedures doesn't mean you leave out the provisional ballots. It doesn't mean that we don't like this bill unless you change it and leave out provisional ballots. It means some other procedures. You're going to change some other procedures. Then we have the Assembly hearing, where they're talking about their objection. It says, CACEO requests that the bill to be amended to require the Secretary of State to amend the voting system use procedures to address inclusion of absentee ballots and provisional ballots in the manual tally votes. What were they concerned about? They weren't getting enough time to take care of all this work that they were expected to do. They wanted more time. Or some other way of doing it. Because at this time they did not have the next bill, which I'll talk about in a minute. So it goes on and on. Now, basically, this is July 20th, and they took out amendment. They took out provisional ballots and all ballots cast at satellite locations. This actually went into the August 7th revision of the bill. This is what they point to. Oh, they took out provisional ballots and ballots cast at satellite locations, but they already said all ballots cast at the precincts. Guess what? Provisional ballots are cast at precincts. So you don't have to say, it's like saying all cars and all black cars in your sentence. And someone would say, hey, wait a second, you already said all cars. You don't have to also say all black cars. If you say all ballots cast at precinct, you don't have to say and provisional ballots. You can just take that part out. And we think that's what they were doing here because no one asked for them to take that out. The reason that they were doing these changes, and we even have the hand marked up copy This is the handwritten copy of this bill. They took this stuff out, and guess what? At that time, they X'd out the arguments in opposition by the Secretary of State. They put in what Bruce McPherson said he wanted. They put that into the bill, which had nothing to do with leaving stuff out. He actually wanted it to be more aggressive in what they were doing. Skipping down. Eventually, this got to the governor's desk. This was the cover sheet on the governor's desk. It says, this bill establishes a uniform procedure for elections officials to conduct the 1% manual tally of ballots, including 1. The requirement that absentee ballots, provisional ballots, and ballots cast at satellite locations will be included. First sentence on the governor's desk. Everybody knew what was going to the governor's desk. They got to review it. If they didn't like it, they could have complained. No, it went there with that first sentence. On top of that, we have a whole analysis by their department. Their analysis says the California Association of Clerks and Elections Officials states that it supports the concept. Okay, so they're not against it at that point. Now we have a letter from Bruce McPherson to the governor. I respectfully request your signature on this bill, which amends the current procedure for the 1% manual tally to specifically include absentee, provisional, and early vote ballots. Done. This is a letter from the Secretary of State matching what was on the governor's desk. Now, how they're ever going to say that it was taken out, I don't know. Then you have a letter from Deborah Bowen. She says in here, some counties have been accused of routinely excluding absentee and provisional ballots from this process and cherry-picking precincts in order to avoid discrepancies. Guess what? She mentions provisional ballots in her letter to the governor, asking for it to be approved. Then it was approved. And so was it on a bill that was in the Assembly called 2769, as I said, by Benoit. Same bill, basically, but from the Assembly. Now, what happened later, this went into process, and I think they were still complaining to the Secretary of State. We don't have enough time to do all this. Assembly Bill 985. Passed in 2011. What this did was allow a two-step process. You can do all the precincts first right away, and then you can put them in batches, and you can do all the vote by mail and provisional ballots later. So there's no problem with getting this done in time. So any question they had about we can't do this in time, already addressed. The change in procedures they wanted from the Secretary of State, already addressed. So this was the only thing the county had in their favor, saying that this bill supported the use of, supported leaving out and omitting 10% of the ballots and another 27% of vote by mail ballots as they were doing here. It was okay to leave some of them out. No, registrar voters, no Michael Vu, no Helen Robbins-Meyer, this Chief Administrative Officer, no Alex Padilla. You're all wrong. This bill went through, including provisionals and vote by mail ballots, and we're going to prove that at our trial, which starts tomorrow at 9 o'clock in Superior Court, San Diego, Department 73. We already got a good ruling from this judge. This judge said when we tried to stop them from certifying that our case was we were likely to prevail at the trial. Now, had he been able to do it in time, we would have been able to stop the certification of this election. Now, I'm really worried about this election here because of all the sloppy procedures being followed by this registrar. Not only is he cutting corners by leaving out 37% of the ballots for the manual tally, a crucial part, but what else is he doing? Whiting out ballots. One person sitting there with a whiteout tape and deciding what the person voted with no review, no reports. No, we can't even find out how many were done. He didn't count them. I just go ahead and have one person, I trust you, go ahead and modify the ballots all you want to what you think they voted. No, that shouldn't be the way it's done. In fact, no one else does this. Everyone is astounded that he's done it. The only other person that's ever done this was a guy in Cuyahoga County, Ohio. Yeah, that was Michael Vu too, when he worked back there, and when he apparently fixed the John Kerry and George Bush election in 2004, that was when they were whiting out ballots again. That's going to be part of this lawsuit as well. Now, we hear all of this talk about the Russians hacking the elections. I don't think the name Vu is a Russian name. Really. So, if you think the Russians are rigging the elections, I beg to differ. It's right here in the United States. And by names such as Michael Vu or Helen Robbins-Meyer, and maybe the DNC. All of these names involved in getting these elections to go their way versus trying to get the honest vote out of the system. Now, we don't have a smoking gun that says that Michael Vu actually fixed this election and committed election fraud. However, I did talk to the FBI and they're investigating, trying to see if there was such a crime committed. What we're trying to do is get him to follow the election code and do a clean audit, and not a sham audit. A clean audit, not a sham audit. So, you know, Russians rigging the election, let's look here closer to home. These elections, the way they're being run, are really laughable. It's a mess. We need, as citizens, to carefully review our elections officials and what we're doing, on what they are doing. Over the last few years, we've developed a methodology, we're calling it the snapshot protocol, of taking a look at this data file that I described and comparing that with the audit so that we can compare one to one. What they were doing with me before was, yeah, there's the audit, and this is a data file of something completely different that you can't compare. Well, that's of no use to us. We can't see if anything happened. They could, yeah, we did the audit, but you know, they could have fixed it completely because you have nothing to compare with. They're still doing this to a large extent. I couldn't get most of the information from them. Of course, they're missing a lot of the ballots, but there's just a discrepancy between the vote by mail ballots that they did do. Each precinct is off. One here, 3 there. You know, they're usually missing some ballots somehow. Well, they'd used a different computer file. Somehow they made a new report and they used that for their 1% manual tally. That's another big question we're going to be asking them. Who made a new report so that you could compare this? What is all of the work that you have to do to get these vote by mail ballots out and put them in precinct order? You got to go in there to up to 40 boxes and pull individual ballots out that are distributed through it and put them in. That's error prone. Across the nation, we need to have citizens come forward and watch very, very carefully what their elections officials are doing. Because if you're not watching it, this audit, internal audit that they do to themselves, guess what? You're not going to identify anything. Yes, officer, I was breaking the law on the freeway. I was speeding. I'm turning myself in. How often does this happen? This is what we're asking them to do. Unless you're there watching them speed, you're not going to be able to catch them, because they're never going to turn themselves in. So we've established a game plan. It's called the 175 county plan, and we can go up. Once we get the 175 covered, we'll go up to 300 or 500. But in any state, we want to look at, across the nation, the top 175 counties and target those counties, have people go in specifically to those counties first and take a look at what they're doing. Because just 175 counties is 50% of the voters. So you don't have to do the other 8,000 counties. You just center on the 175 first. Maybe we'll up it to 300. That gives us 60%. If we go up to 500, that gives us 70% of the voters. And that will be enough to make sure that, for the most part, our elections are clean. Because right now it's a mess. Either they don't have any physical record of what the voter intended to vote. Many counties do this. Even this one. They have the direct recording electronic equipment that they included in the early voting. They're supposed to have a printout, a cash register type receipt that they use to, the voter can look at it and go, yeah, that's how I voted. And then that's used to do their manual count. Well, the printer jammed. And they didn't have this thing. So then they said, well, we'll just have the machine printed out later. Well, that eliminates the idea. You may as well not do any audit at all. Just forget to audit if you're not going to have that printed receipt. So many discrepancies, they just push right under the rug. And if you're not there watching, no one is going to know, because they're not going to report speeding to the CHP on the freeway. Same idea. So I call to everyone across the nation, take a look at our 175 counties. Even if you're not next to one or in one, you can help us in your state. And even if you're in a small county in your state, you're welcome to do oversight. It's not against the law. But in terms of our resources, we want to try to focus on making sure, because some states don't have a lot of people, but they'll have one county that's really important. Nevada, not that many people, but Clark County is Las Vegas. So that's an important, really big county, and you can just ignore the rest of Nevada until you get up to Reno. And that's not on the top 175. So some areas across the nation, the states don't seem that important, but there's certain counties that are, and that's why we're doing it, strategizing that way. In California, the top 3 counties are Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego. Actually, it's Los Angeles, San Diego, and Orange County in order. Los Angeles is 3 times larger than San Diego in terms of numbers of voters. Those top 3, though, account for 50% of the voters in the state. It's huge. It's a huge lopsided amount. If you take the top dozen counties, we're talking about 76% of the voters in the top dozen. That's mostly Southern California and some of the Bay Area, and that's it. 2 dozen, you're up to 92%. So we're not going to work on the other 8%, which is 34 counties, and a lot of work just to get that last 8%. But as I said, if you're in one of those counties, then you're welcome to follow the procedures that we've set up so that you can make sure that you're getting as much success there as we are here. What's going to happen is, as you follow this, many of you are going to figure out that your registrar of voters and your elections officials are cheating, just like we found that ours is. You'll find out that they're not doing everything that they're supposed to, and that, guess what? They're not reporting they're speeding on the freeway. Just not going to happen unless you're there. And when you come in and you're there, just like the police officer, the police car on the freeway, everybody drives the speed limit right around that guy. You're going to be that police car on the freeway watching your registrar of voters, and everything's going to look fine while you're there, we hope. At least it'll look more fine than it would be. So don't be surprised if you go into your registrar of voters and you say, hey, everything looks pretty good in our registrar of voters. I don't know what these other people. That's because you're there. And if you're not there, who knows what happens? We don't. Basically, we have no one really watching these audits. We've gone over to Florida in this last primary, which was August 30th. No one had come in to watch these audits for decades, probably, at least not with a video camera, to watch what was going on. So they're surprised. Oh, we've never had any citizens here at all. Oh, should we not sit at our little table and look at each other? Oh, I guess we should look at the cameras and look at you, some of the people that are coming to see. This is the kind of changes that they'll be making as soon as you show up. So I want to thank everybody, all the volunteers behind us here that have helped out with observing this. We're going to be at the trial tomorrow in Superior Court, San Diego. We have asked them to allow cameras in the proceeding, which is unusual, but guess what? Who are the defendant? It's a public institution who shouldn't have anything to hide. So there shouldn't be any reason to not have cameras in. Of course, the county says, oh, we we don't want cameras in there because that's going to be diminishing the credibility of the courts or something. No, this should be actually, we'd love to have it live, you know, live stream instead of having to record it, but we may not be able to do that. That's at 9 o'clock. It starts tomorrow in Superior Court. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday and the next Monday are off, and it's going to continue October 11th on Tuesday. That's going to be the last day of the trial. Again, this is citizens oversight suing Michael Vu and the Registrar of Voters for shabby audits. And we're going to win. We're going to win this one. Yeah, I'd like to invite now anyone from our crew here to come forward and say what you'd like. This is Josephine.
Hi. I was given a piece of paper that had the definition of the 1% tally, and I did not bring it with me, unfortunately, but I remember more or less it said that the 1% tally is an audit of 1% of the original canvas. And above the definition of 1% tally was the definition of original canvas, which is all votes cast, including but not limited to votes by mail and provisional ballots. These were the definition provided to me by the Registrar of Voters Office. Also, with regard to the whited out ballots, I believe there is a law which states that ballots may not be, should not be altered. I'm not sure the exact definition, but it said that ballots may not be altered. I would think that when you are whiting out a ballot, it is altered. That's the two things I needed to say.
Yeah, of course, their argument for whiting it out is, oh, well, they had some extraneous marks on the ballot, and it's not going to go through the scanner correctly unless we fix those, and we're using tape so that it could be peeled off to see what happened below. But guess what? No one is looking at that. The fact that you use tape so that you can peel it off is of no value whatsoever unless someone is actually peeling it off to see if it was done correctly. No one is doing that. There's no reporting, no summaries, no count, no one peeling it off, nothing.
It's being scanned whited out.
Yeah, and it's scanned whited out. So they are, hey, look, if everybody is honest and no one is ever attempted to rig the election, then fine. But guess what? We're talking about human beings here. We're talking about people that may accept money to fix the election. There may be compromised employees inside the Registrar of Voters. There could be hackers getting in to change the values within the central tabulator. They say it's not on the internet. Who knows? I certainly can't prove that it's not. And they can't, you know, they say it's not hooked up. Hackers can't get to it. It would be very easy for a compromised employee to plug in a little teeny tiny USB Ethernet connection, you know, wireless connection that would connect it to the internet and let somebody else, oh, I didn't do it. I left that over there. That was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And then someone else could rig the election. Very easy. That guy can make some money on the side, and then the thing is hackable. So we're not trying to figure that out. We're just trying to make sure that these audits can catch it if it does happen. Now, is there anyone else that would like to say? Okay, Daniel Beeman, come on up here and say what you'd like.
Hello.
Your sign is
as my recovering politician, what I'm a little scared of is the votes don't count. And if the votes don't count, why would you vote? Why would you even mark the X, go to the box? See, when I ran for city council, I had to get signatures, many signatures, and I would tell them that your vote counted, so please vote for me, sign for me so that I can run. And then when I ran for the school board of the county of San Diego, I did the same thing. But I'm really scared that why would they come and mark the box when it's not going to count? We've proven it didn't count in many times. We have to do something here. The young people are not going to wait in line like they did before for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours and know that their vote isn't being counted. Why would they do that? They don't have the time like that. So now we need to do something better. And as I said, as a Republican, as a recovering politician, I just need to know that if I'm going to work for other people, that the vote counts. if I'm going to vote for people, that my vote counts. If we don't have these things, especially for our young people and the students at SDSU that had their problems, their ballots knocked out because they didn't put the right dorm number. In California, you could be homeless and vote. That's our right to vote. And we need to encourage people and enlighten people to vote. So now we need you to come out, to watch the polling places, to vote, and to help us make sure that this is done right. We need to also put the judges on stand and say, hey, you have to look out for us too. Because we're seeing that that's happening in the judicial system too, that they're not looking out for us and that they're putting us off. And we can no longer be put off. Thank you very much.
Martha Sullivan?
Hi, I just wanted to point out that this sign is actually from the protest of the 2004 presidential election. I held on to it, and unfortunately I had to dig it out, and it's very appropriate. I also want to point out that as with the 2004 election, and actually the 2000 election, in 2004, the Secretary of State, Ken Blackwell, was a chair of the George W. Bush presidential campaign. That was considered, I mean, we all protested that. We all pointed out the conflict of interest there. The same thing happened with Katherine Harris in Florida in 2000, and we know how that turned out. Here in California, sad to say, the same thing has happened. Alex Padilla, the Secretary of State, is a major fundraiser and supporter of Hillary Clinton. Now, this isn't about Hillary Clinton, but this is about the conflict of interest of having the nation's largest state's election official responsible for the integrity of the election be a partisan fundraiser and supporter for one of the candidates. It's an outright bald-faced conflict of interest, and that means that our scrutiny of this has to be even more dedicated and serious.
Okay, so is there any questions off the live feed there that you can see?
There are numerous comments, but one question is, how did this happen so quickly?
By this, you mean the lawsuit, or? Okay, well, actually didn't happen quickly. It may seem quick to people if you're just watching, but in terms of what this is, in terms of our activity here, this has been in process for years. As Martha Sullivan said, she's been involved in this since 2004. I did a detailed review of this registrar of voters, trying to understand what they were doing inside in 2008. It took me 2 years to figure it out. Why did it take so long? Is because I had to ask them questions, big long set of questions in writing, which they would take weeks or months to actually complete and fill out. And then a lot of times their answer would be, we need more clarification. I wouldn't get an answer on and on until finally what I did was figure out that the 1% manual tally, I had to have that file to be able to really observe what they were doing. Then in the next few elections, I started asking for that file. I said, I want that file so that I can compare. And I still couldn't really figure out what they were doing. But I went forward and did it to all the counties in California and said, I want that file from everybody so that I can check what you're doing. And a lot of them responded. But, just the fact that someone is asking for the file is going to be perking them up and saying, maybe we better not fix the election that way because we've got somebody asking for our file here. I figured it would be beneficial even if I couldn't really complete the full analysis. But I did in some cases. And then this year, we finally were on top of it enough to be able to see that they were just omitting so many ballots, 37%. And there was a lot of worry, of course, this year about, as Martha was saying, hey, even the Secretary of State is raising money for one of the candidates, and he put these processes in place where it was hard for people to cross over and all kinds of things happening. So we were concerned, And then this came forward, and then in terms of the time frame, it wasn't quick enough. We couldn't stop the election when they were trying to certify the primary. What are you saying there?
There's
Is there
a
a question?
question. There's a question that one viewer had. It says, "Will this have impact on the general election?"
Well, we hope so. Our trial was scheduled for tomorrow instead of the original date, which was December. That's how long they were originally planning for. We moved the date up not to November, but to October, 2 months earlier than it would have normally been scheduled. So hopefully, we got a 4-day trial going on. We're going to be exposing everything that we can about this in this trial through direct examination of Michael Vu and other employees here. But this result will only be legally applicable to San Diego. All right, so that's been pointed out to me. It doesn't automatically extend to every county in California. Even though you would think, well, gee, they've clarified the law. This court says this is the way it should be done. Therefore, you would think that, if I'm an election official somewhere else, I better follow the law the way they just determined in this court of law here. However, that's not the way it's done. It turns out you have to go to the appeals level, and they start over. They start the trial over from scratch and do it all again, and then their finding is something that applies to everybody. So that's not going to happen before November. However, the scrutiny that we put on the election officials, we can do that right away. And I'm encouraging everybody who's viewing this, and all your friends, neighbors, and relatives, etc., across the nation in the 175 counties especially, to start observing the process that they use in all aspects. You can go in and watch them bring in the vote by mail ballots, open them, sort them around. But mostly I want to make sure that we watch any audit that they do. Not all states do it. Not all districts do a good one. Some of them are really bad and limited. In Florida, they just do one race and 1%.
How do people get started?
Okay, at citizensoversight.org, our website, we have an election team link, and click on that. You can go to the sign up, citizensoversight.org/sign up. We'll make sure you get information on how you can join your team. And sometimes if you're in a state we haven't penetrated yet, we're going to want a leader in that state to do the original work. But actually, if you're just one person in a state, you can do a lot. You can actually contact 5 or 6 counties that you're targeting and get them to answer to you as one person. You can do a lot of good. So, but you can't be the boots on the ground. We need people in these counties, boots on the ground, to be able to go in and watch what's going on, like that police officer on the freeway. It's going to be flowing smooth if we're all there. And if we're not, they're just going to, who knows what they're doing. It's going to be out of control. Good question. Thanks for that. Next question, Peter. Anything more?
You can ask. This is live, so that you can just ask if anyone in the audience.
Well, if there's anyone with a question there, go ahead and tell me what it is that you got in your thing.
Just mostly comments.
Okay. You want a statement?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
My name's Mark Raymond.
Okay, come on up here.
My name is Mark Raymond, and I talk to a lot of people. That's just what we have to do. The word isn't going to get out in the media. It has to get out through us. And I'm astonished when I talk to people how interested they are, but they haven't found out yet of what's going on. And I can't emphasize how important this is. This is not a left, right, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal issue. This is fundamental. If the voting is not valid, nothing else matters. The candidates, the laws, the judges, anything we use our voice to express doesn't matter if the voting is not real. This is paramount and extremely important. And I think once people understand the gravity of it, then they will come out and produce. And I'm so grateful to Ray for organizing this and everyone else. Thank you.
That's a really good point. Let's underline that again. If we don't have our vote so that we can trust it, then you may as well not work on anything else. Running for office, that's not going to do any good. You're not going to win. And the people in office, unfortunately, they like the system rigged the way it is. They got there. So they're not ever going to be working from the inside to fix it. The only people that can watch this effectively are the citizens. Citizens have to be on the guard, watching this, hen house against these foxes that we got in office. That's the only way it can be done, is we've got to do it from the bottom. We have to have people, just citizens, not elected officials, not people that have any stake in the process, going in to watch. Because that's how we can preserve our vote. They talk about campaign financing. Well, that's an important issue, but it doesn't really matter who spends money on what if they can rig the election behind the scenes and put who they want in. The only story on that game is the media loves it, because guess who makes all the money? The media makes that money on ads, on, I say media in a global sense, people's mailing stuff out, all the postage, all of the people making flyers that are thrown away, right? All of this money basically worthless unless our vote counts. So this is a very fundamental, completely nonpartisan issue. Citizens oversight is nonpartisan. We're not working for any candidate or party here. We are going to be watching this election to make sure as much as we can that we're finding out how they're rigging the election. So that's why we want you as citizens to sign up, go to your registrar of voters in your area and watch them, and we'll train you on how to watch it, because it's a little bit difficult. It's an audit. You have to have a data file. You have to look at numbers. But it's not rocket science. It's anybody who's a little bit of an accounting person, good with numbers and detail, can do this. And that's the kind of people we're actually looking for, that can take a look and see what's going on. And you know what? You go in here, the people here have done it. You don't know what you're going to find. You go in and see whiting out ballots, that's what we're finding here. That's something that we didn't expect. We didn't know, okay, look for whiting out ballots. Never crossed our mind. So you're not going to know what you're going to find in your area. So you need to be open and watching and seeing what's going on and trying to understand what they're doing as much as you can. So we've spent enough time here today. I want to thank everybody here and everything they've done to support our work. And you out there, please join us. We're going to be watching these elections and making sure that they're clean. And this lawsuit is for a clean audit, not a sham audit. Thank you.
For all the viewers that are watching on Facebook, can you remind them
How to get it?
Right.
Citizens Oversight Projects is a Facebook page. This live feed is there, so you will be able to see it later. We're also doing a YouTube version because sometimes the audio is not working very well on Facebook, and it turns out if you're looking at it on a portable device, you can't hear this, but you've got to take it off mute on your portable device. There's a setting for that, and I've discovered that's where it is. But if you're on a regular desktop, you're not going to have to worry. We're going to be talking to the teams as soon as we get past this election, at least weekly or twice a week via conference call webcast, so we can get everybody coordinated. And there's a new Facebook page called Citizens Oversight Election Team. And so there's already about 400 people that are members of that, and we're going to be using that for coordinating people around the country. Okay?
Well done. Good job.